I found out my HOA was stealing utilities from me when my gas bill tripled in January. And I knew something was seriously wrong because I kept my thermostat at a reasonable 68 degrees and barely used my stove. My name is Aaron Bradford, and I bought my house in Scottsdale, Arizona about 2 years ago. It was a beautiful property in the Desert Heights community, a small development of maybe 30 homes surrounding a central clubhouse and pool area. The place seemed perfect when I moved in during the spring, with the desert landscape beautifully maintained and the neighbors friendly enough. I worked as a civil engineer, which meant I understood property lines, easements, and utility systems better than most people. That knowledge would become incredibly important. The trouble started in December when I noticed my gas bill climbing. I live alone, work long hours, and I am not home much during the week. My gas usage should have been minimal. In November, my bill was around $40. In December, it jumped to $120. By January, I was staring at a bill for $315. Something was definitely wrong. I called the gas company on a Tuesday morning before work. The representative, a patient woman named Sandra, walked me through my usage patterns. She confirmed that my meter readings were accurate and that the usage was definitely coming from my meter. She suggested I might have a leak and recommended I call a plumber. I took the afternoon off and hired a licensed plumber to inspect my entire system. He was thorough, checking every connection, every pipe, every appliance. After 3 hours, he gave me his report. "Your system is perfect," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "No leaks, no issues. Everything is functioning exactly as it should. Your water heater is efficient. Your furnace is running normally. Based on what I see here, you should be using about $40 to $50 of gas per month, tops." That confused me even more. If my system was fine, where was all that gas going? I paid the plumber and started investigating on my own. I went outside to look at my gas meter, which was located on the side of my house facing the community common area. The meter was spinning steadily, even though I had turned off my furnace and was not using any gas appliances inside. I turned off every gas appliance in my house. The furnace was already off, so I turned off the pilot light on my water heater too. I went back outside. The meter was still spinning. That made no sense whatsoever. If nothing in my house was using gas, why was the meter running? I followed the gas line from the meter along the side of my house. It went into my house as expected, but I noticed something odd. There was a junction point, and a second line branched off before entering my home. This second line was partially buried and ran toward the back of my property, heading in the direction of the community pool and clubhouse area. I grabbed a shovel and carefully started following the line. It crossed my property line and continued into the common area, running underground toward the pool house. The pool house was a decent-sized structure with changing rooms, bathrooms, and a large heated indoor section where the HOA hosted community events during cooler months. My gas line was feeding the pool house heating system. I stood there in disbelief. Someone had tapped into my gas line to heat community property, and I had been paying for it. No wonder my bills had skyrocketed when the weather turned cold. They were heating the entire pool house on my dime. I immediately called the gas company again and explained what I had found. Sandra sounded shocked and said she would send someone out the next day to verify. True to her word, a technician arrived Wednesday morning. He followed the line just as I had and confirmed my discovery. "This is definitely your line, and it is definitely feeding that structure," he said, pointing toward the pool house. "This is illegal. Whoever did this committed utility theft. You need to contact your HOA immediately and probably get a lawyer." I thanked him and went inside to cool off, both literally and figuratively. I was furious. I had been paying hundreds of extra dollars because someone thought it was acceptable to steal my utilities. The audacity was incredible. I drafted a formal email to the HOA board, outlining the problem with photos and the gas company technician's report attached. I sent it that afternoon and waited for a response. The response came faster than I expected, but not in the way I hoped. At 6:30 that evening, someone knocked aggressively on my door. I opened it to find Rebecca Windsor, the HOA president, standing on my porch with her arms crossed. Rebecca was in her early 50s, with short blonde hair that looked professionally styled and an expression that suggested she had never heard the word no in her life. "Aaron, we need to talk about your ridiculous email," she said, pushing past me into my house without being invited. "Excuse me," I said, closing the door and turning to face her. "You are in my house uninvited, and there is nothing ridiculous about my email. Your pool house is stealing my gas." "Stealing is such an ugly word," Rebecca said, waving her hand dismissively. "The gas line was installed that way when the community was built. It has always been connected like that. You are not being stolen from. This is just how the system works." I stared at her in disbelief. "You are heating community property with my personal gas line and you think that's acceptable?" "I have been paying hundreds of dollars extra. That is theft, Rebecca. That is literally the definition of theft." "The developer set it up this way," she insisted. "When you bought your house, you accepted the property as is. That includes the utility configuration." "Show me where in the CC and Articus it says I am responsible for heating the pool house," I said, crossing my arms. "Show me any documentation that this arrangement was disclosed during my purchase." Rebecca's face reddened slightly. "I do not have that with me right now, but I am sure it is documented somewhere. The point is, this is how it has always been done, and you cannot just change it because you are upset about your gas bill." "Watch me," I said flatly. "I am hiring a plumber to cap that line where it exits my meter. You can figure out your own heating solution." "You cannot do that," Rebecca practically shouted. "The pool house needs to be heated. We have events scheduled. The community relies on that facility." "Then the community can pay to heat it," I replied. "Not me personally. This is insane, Rebecca." "You must see how insane this is." She glared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she looked back. "You are making a big mistake. The HOA board will not tolerate this kind of selfish behavior. We will take action." "I look forward to it," I said, holding the door open for her. She left, and I immediately called a lawyer. I found one who specialized in property law and HOA disputes. His name was Martin Chen, and he had great reviews online. I explained the situation to him over the phone that evening. "This is one of the most blatant cases of utility theft I have heard of," Martin said. "You are absolutely within your rights to disconnect that line. In fact, you should disconnect it immediately. Document everything. Save all your gas bills. Take photos and videos of the connection and keep records of all communication with the HOA." "They are threatening to take action against me," I said. "Let them try," Martin replied. "They have no legal standing here. You are the victim of theft. If they fine you or try to place a lien on your property, we will sue them into next week. But do this properly. Hire a licensed, insured plumber to do the disconnection. Make sure everything is done to code. Do not give them any ammunition to use against you." I felt better after talking to Martin. I hired a plumber for Friday morning, giving me 2 days to document everything thoroughly. I took photos and videos from every angle, showing the gas line connection, the meter, the path to the pool house. I made copies of all my gas bills from the past year. I requested formal documentation from the gas company about the illegal connection. Thursday morning, I received a certified letter from the HOA. It was a formal notice of violation, stating that I was not permitted to alter community utility infrastructure, and that any attempt to disconnect the gas line to the pool house would result in immediate fines of $500 per day, plus the cost of reconnection. I laughed out loud when I read it. They were doubling down on their theft and trying to intimidate me with fines. I forwarded the letter to Martin immediately. He called me back within an hour. This is perfect. They just put their illegal activity in writing and threatened you with retaliation for stopping it. Save that letter. Frame it if you want. This is going to make our case incredibly easy. So I should still go ahead with the disconnection? I asked. Absolutely, Martin confirmed. They are bluffing. They know they are in the wrong and they are hoping you will back down. Do not back down. The plumber arrived Friday morning at 8. His name was Carlos and he had 20 years of experience. I showed him the setup and he shook his head in disbelief. In 20 years, I have never seen anything like this, Carlos said. This is completely illegal. Whoever installed this could lose their license. Can you disconnect it? I asked. Of course. I will cap your line right after the meter before it branches. That way your gas only goes to your house and that illegal branch will be completely disconnected. It will take me maybe 2 hours. Perfect. Please document everything as you work. I need this done by the book. Carlos got to work. He took photos before he started, during the process, and after completion. He provided me with a detailed invoice describing exactly what he did and why. He confirmed that all work was done to code and that my gas system was now functioning exactly as it should be, feeding only my property. By 10:30 Friday morning, the deed was done. The pool house was no longer stealing my gas. I felt a huge sense of relief and satisfaction. I had fixed the problem legally and properly. The satisfaction lasted about 4 hours. At 2:30 Friday afternoon, Rebecca was back at my door, this time with 2 other board members. I recognized them as Brenda and Carol, both women in their late 40s who apparently had nothing better to do than harass people about HOA nonsense. What did you do? Rebecca demanded when I opened the door. I corrected an illegal utility theft situation, I said calmly. My gas now only services my property as it should have from the beginning. You have ruined everything, Brenda shouted. She was a short woman with curly red hair and a voice that could shatter glass. The pool house is freezing. We have a community potluck scheduled for tomorrow evening. How are we supposed to host events in a freezing building? That sounds like a HOA problem, not an Aaron problem, I replied. You have known about this issue since Wednesday. You have had time to arrange alternative heating. You are going to pay for this, Carol chimed in. She was tall and thin with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. We are fining you $500 per day starting today. That is $15,000 per month until you reconnect that line. Go ahead and try, I said. My lawyer is eager to hear about it. In fact, he is eager to hear about all of this. The illegal utility theft, the threatening letters, the harassment. Please fine me, sue me. Do whatever you think you can do. I promise you it will not end well for the HOA. Rebecca's face turned an impressive shade of purple. You smug little man. You think you are so smart because you are an engineer. You think you can just do whatever you want. Well, you cannot. You live in a community with rules, and you will follow those rules. I am following all applicable rules and laws, I said. Unlike the HOA, which has been committing utility theft for who knows how long, how many other homes in this community have similar connections? How many other people have you been stealing from? That question seemed to hit a nerve. All three women went quiet for a moment, exchanging glances. Just mine, then, I continued. So you specifically targeted my property for this theft. That is somehow even worse. How did you decide I was the lucky winner who got to pay everyone's heating bills? The developer set it up that way, Rebecca repeated, but her voice lacked conviction this time. Then the developer committed fraud, I said. And if you have continued it knowingly, you are complicit. Talk to your lawyer, Rebecca. I think you are going to find that you are in serious trouble here. They left without another word, but I knew this was far from over. I called Martin and updated him on the encounter. He was pleased with how I had handled it and told me to continue documenting everything. The weekend was quiet, surprisingly. I assumed the HOA potluck was either canceled or held in a very cold pool house. I did not attend, obviously. I stayed home and enjoyed the fact that my gas meter was barely moving. Monday morning, I received another certified letter. This one informed me that the HOA was placing a lien on my property for $1,500, representing 3 days of fines at $500 per day. They demanded immediate payment and reconnection of the gas line. I forwarded it to Martin before I even finished my coffee. He called me back quickly. Okay, they are being incredibly stupid. This is actionable on multiple fronts. I am going to draft a lawsuit against the HOA for utility theft, harassment, and improper lien placement. We are going to sue for your stolen gas payments, legal fees, and damages. Are you comfortable moving forward with litigation? Absolutely, I said without hesitation. They are not going to stop unless someone forces them to stop. Agreed. I will have papers filed by end of week. In the meantime, send a certified letter to the HOA board formally disputing the lien and demanding they remove it immediately. I will draft that for you. Martin sent me the dispute letter within an hour. I printed it, signed it, and took it to the post office to send certified mail. The letter outlined that the lien was improper, that the fines were baseless, and that the HOA had engaged in illegal activity. It gave them 7 days to remove the lien or face legal action. While I was at the post office, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, but it was local, so I answered. "Is this Aaron Bradford?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is David Martinez. I live 3 houses down from you in Desert Heights. I just got a call from Rebecca Windsor asking me to testify against you in some kind of HOA hearing. She says you have been stealing gas from the community. I told her that sounded insane and asked her to explain. She gave me some nonsense story that did not make any sense, so I am calling you directly. What is actually going on? I was surprised but pleased. I explained the entire situation to David, from discovering the theft to disconnecting the line. He listened without interrupting. "That is exactly what I thought," David said when I finished. "Rebecca and her friends have been running this HOA like their own personal kingdom for years. They fine people for the stupidest things. My neighbor got fined because her mailbox was the wrong shade of beige. I am not even joking. They pulled out paint swatches and everything." "That is insane," I said. "It is," David agreed. "Look, I am a CPA and I am on the HOA Finance Committee. I do not have access to all the records because Rebecca keeps tight control, but I have seen some things that do not add up. Our HOA fees are higher than comparable communities, but our common areas are not better maintained. I have suspected for a while that something shady is going on. Your situation might be the tip of the iceberg." This was interesting, very interesting. "Would you be willing to look into the finances more thoroughly if you had access?" "If I had proper access, yes," David said. but Rebecca guards those records like a dragon. As a homeowner, though, I have the right to request them. Maybe it is time I did that. My lawyer might want to talk to you, I said. Would that be okay? Absolutely. I am tired of this HOA treating everyone like children. Give him my number. I thanked David and immediately called Martin to tell him about this development. Martin was very interested and said he would contact David directly. Things were getting more complicated, but in a good way. Tuesday afternoon, I came home from work to find my gas meter missing. Not broken, not damaged, completely removed. There was a cap where it should have been, and a notice from the gas company saying my service had been disconnected due to a request from the property owner. I had not requested any such thing. I called the gas company immediately, and after being transferred 3 times, I reached a supervisor named Marcus who could actually help me. Yes, sir. We received a service disconnection request this morning from a Rebecca Windsor, who identified herself as the property manager for your address, Marcus explained. She is not the property manager. She is the HOA president, and she has no authority over my utilities. This is harassment and fraud. Oh, Marcus said, sounding concerned. That is a serious problem. Can you verify your ownership and identity? I provided all the necessary information. Marcus put me on hold for several minutes, then returned. Mr. Bradford, I sincerely apologize. This should never have happened. Miss Windsor provided what appeared to be legitimate documentation, but upon further review, it is clear she did not have proper authority. We will have a technician out to reinstall your meter and restore service within 3 hours. There will be no charge to you. We are also flagging your account so this cannot happen again. I appreciate that, I said. I need documentation of this incident. I am in litigation with the HOA, and this is evidence of harassment. I will email you a formal incident report within the hour, Marcus promised. True to their word, a gas company technician arrived at 5:30 and reinstalled my meter. He apologized profusely for the confusion and confirmed my service was fully restored. I thanked him and immediately forwarded the incident report to Martin. Martin called me back immediately, and he sounded excited in a lawyer kind of way. This is huge, Aaron. This is fraud. She impersonated someone with authority over your property to damage your utilities. This goes beyond a civil dispute. This is criminal activity. You need to file a police report. Really? I was surprised. I knew Rebecca was being terrible, but I had not thought of it as criminal. Yes, really. She committed fraud against a utility company and caused damage to you. File the report tonight. The more documentation we have, the stronger our case becomes. I drove to the Scottsdale Police Department and filed a report. The officer who took my statement was a middle-aged man named Officer Patterson, who seemed genuinely interested in the case. HOA disputes usually are not criminal matters, Officer Patterson said. But fraud against a utility company definitely is. We will investigate this. Do you have documentation? I showed him everything. The gas bills, the photos of the illegal connection, the plumber's report, the incident report from the gas company, all of it. Officer Patterson took copies of everything and gave me a case number. Someone will follow up with you within a few days, he said. In the meantime, if she tries anything else, call us immediately. I went home feeling like I had done everything right. I had documented everything, followed all proper procedures, and now the police were involved. Rebecca and her HOA board had made a serious mistake. Wednesday morning, Martin called with an update. I spoke with David Martinez yesterday, very helpful guy. He submitted a formal request for HOA financial records, as is his right under Arizona law. Rebecca has to provide them within 10 business days. David thinks there might be some irregularities in how HOA funds have been used. Like embezzlement, I asked. Possibly. We will see what the records show. But combined with the utility theft from your property and the fraudulent utility disconnection, we are building a very strong case. I filed our lawsuit yesterday. The HOA should be served with papers today or tomorrow. What are we suing for exactly? Utility theft, harassment, improper fines, improper lien, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and fraud. I am asking for full reimbursement of your stolen gas payments, removal of all fines and liens, all legal fees, and punitive damages of $50,000. I am also asking for a court order requiring the HOA to conduct a full audit of its finances and restructure its board. Wow, I said. That is serious. They got serious when Rebecca committed fraud to shut off your gas. They made this much bigger than it needed to be. Martin was right. This could have been resolved easily. The HOA could have apologized, paid me back for the stolen gas, and found a legitimate way to heat their pool house. Instead, they had escalated at every opportunity. I went to work feeling good about where things stood. I was fighting back effectively, and I had the law on my side. The truth was on my side. How could I lose? Thursday afternoon, I found out they were willing to go even lower. I came home to find my front yard completely torn up. Someone had dug multiple deep holes, destroying my landscaping and irrigation system. There was a note on my door from the HOA stating that they were conducting emergency utility inspections and that I would be responsible for the costs. I was furious. I took photos and videos of the damage, then called the police. Officer Patterson himself responded to my call, which I appreciated. "This is vandalism," he said after surveying the damage. "They cannot just destroy your property and call it an inspection. Did they notify you in advance?" "No notification at all, just this note claiming it was an emergency inspection." Officer Patterson took a report and photos. "This is related to the fraud case from earlier this week. I am going to add this to that investigation. We are going to need to interview Miss Windsor formally. This pattern of behavior is concerning. Thank you, officer. I appreciate you taking this seriously." After Officer Patterson left, I called Martin and updated him. He was as angry as I was. This is destruction of property. This is harassment. This is getting out of control. I am filing for an emergency restraining order against Rebecca Windsor and the HOA board. They need to be legally prohibited from contacting you or coming onto your property. "Can you do that?" I asked. Given the pattern of escalating harassment and destruction, yes, I will file tomorrow morning. We should have a hearing within a few days. I spent the evening documenting the damage and getting estimates for repair. The landscaping company estimated $3,000 to fix everything. The irrigation specialist said another $1,500 to repair the damaged system. This was getting expensive for the HOA because I was adding every penny to the lawsuit. Friday morning, the police called. Detective Sarah Chen, who had been assigned to investigate the case, wanted to meet with me. I took the afternoon off work and met her at the station. Detective Chen was a sharp woman in her 30s who clearly took her job seriously. She had reviewed all the reports and documentation. "Mr. Bradford, I want to be clear about what we are investigating here," she began. "We have utility fraud against the gas company. We have utility theft from you personally. We have vandalism of your property, and we have a pattern of harassment. These are not civil HOA matters anymore. These are criminal offenses." "I understand," I said. "I need to ask you some questions, and then I am going to interview Miss Windsor and other HOA board members. I have already spoken with the gas company, and they are cooperating fully. Your plumber Carlos also provided a statement. Everything supports your version of events. Detective Chen asked me detailed questions about the timeline, about every interaction with Rebecca and the board, about the gas line discovery, about everything. I answered honestly and completely. The interview took almost 2 hours. "Thank you for your cooperation," Detective Chen said as we finished. "I am going to recommend charges against Miss Windsor for utility fraud and vandalism. The utility theft is more complicated because it involves the HOA as an organization, but I think we can make a case for that as well. You should hear something within a week or two." I left the police station feeling vindicated. This was no longer just me fighting the HOA. The police were taking it seriously. The legal system was working. The emergency restraining order hearing was scheduled for Monday afternoon. Martin was confident we would get it. He had compiled a thick folder of evidence showing the escalating pattern of harassment over the weekend. Something unexpected happened. I received emails from 3 other homeowners in Desert Heights. They had heard about my situation through neighborhood gossip and wanted to talk. Each of them had their own horror stories about Rebecca and the HOA board. Jennifer lived 2 streets over. She had been fined repeatedly for her children's toys being visible in her yard, even though they were neatly stored. The fines had totaled thousands of dollars, and the HOA had threatened to foreclose on her house. Marcus lived near the entrance to the community. He had been fined because his truck was visible from the street, supposedly violating some aesthetic rule. He had challenged the fine, and Rebecca had retaliated by denying his request to install solar panels, citing non-existent rules. Patricia lived near me. She had discovered that her water bill was unusually high and suspected she might have a situation similar to mine with the gas. She had been afraid to investigate because she saw how the HOA was treating me. I put all 3 of them in contact with Martin. He was thrilled to have additional victims willing to testify about the HOA's pattern of abuse. Monday's hearing went exactly as Martin predicted. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Robertson, reviewed our evidence and seemed appalled. "Miss Windsor," Judge Robertson said, addressing Rebecca and her lawyer, "the pattern of behavior documented here is deeply concerning. You have fraudulently interfered with Mr. Bradford's utilities, destroyed his property, and engaged in what appears to be systematic harassment. Do you have any response to these allegations?" Rebecca's lawyer, a nervous-looking young man, spoke up. "Your Honor, these are disputes arising from HOA governance, which is typically handled through civil procedures, not restraining orders." "Fraud is not an HOA governance issue," Judge Robertson said sharply. "Vandalism is not an HOA governance issue. I am granting the restraining order. Miss Windsor and all Desert Heights HOA board members are prohibited from contacting Mr. Bradford directly or entering his property for any reason. All communication must go through attorneys. Violation of this order will result in arrest. Do you understand?" Rebecca looked like she wanted to argue, but her lawyer nodded quickly. "Yes, Your Honor, we understand." I walked out of that courtroom feeling better than I had in weeks. Rebecca could not harass me anymore. The police were investigating. The lawsuit was moving forward. Justice was happening. Tuesday morning, David Martinez called me with interesting news. "Aaron, I got the financial records from the HOA." Rebecca fought it, but her lawyer made her comply with the records request. "I have been going through them, and there are some serious problems." "What kind of problems?" I asked. "Money going to vendors that do not exist. Payments for services that were never performed. The pool house heating bills alone do not make sense. According to the financial records, the HOA has been paying for pool house gas service. But if they were paying for it, why were they stealing from your line? That was a good question. A very good question. Maybe they were paying for part of it and stealing the rest to pocket the difference, I suggested. Maybe, David said. Or maybe they were not paying for anything and those payments in the records went somewhere else. I think Rebecca might have been embezzling from the HOA. I am going to send all of this to your lawyer and recommend that the HOA hire a forensic accountant. Do that, I said. This keeps getting deeper. Martin received David's findings that afternoon and called me immediately. Aaron, this is explosive. If David's suspicions are correct, Rebecca has been stealing from the HOA for years. We are talking about potential felony embezzlement on top of everything else. I am amending our lawsuit to include these findings, and I am sending this information to the police. The house of cards was collapsing around Rebecca Windsor. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then I remembered my destroyed yard and my $300 gas bills and the feeling passed. Detective Chen called Wednesday afternoon. Mr. Bradford, I wanted to update you. We executed a search warrant on HOA records yesterday. We also brought Miss Windsor in for questioning. She has been extremely uncooperative, but the evidence speaks for itself. We are preparing to file multiple charges including utility fraud, theft, vandalism, and embezzlement. The district attorney's office is reviewing everything now. Embezzlement? I asked, wanting confirmation. Yes, it appears Miss Windsor has been stealing from the HOA for at least 3 years. We are finding fake vendor payments, inflated service bills, all sorts of irregularities. The total is probably over $100,000. This is serious white-collar crime. I was stunned. $100,000. Rebecca had been running a scam for years, and my discovery of the gas theft had exposed everything. What happens now? I asked. The DA will decide on formal charges, probably within a week. Miss Windsor will likely be arrested. The other board members might face charges too if we find they were complicit. This is an ongoing investigation. Thank you for the update, Detective. Thank you for reporting it, Detective Chen said. People think HOA problems are not real crimes, but theft is theft. Fraud is fraud. It does not matter if it is happening through an HOA or any other way. Thursday afternoon, the bombshell dropped. Rebecca Windsor was arrested at her home and charged with multiple counts of fraud, theft, embezzlement, and vandalism. The local news picked up the story. HOA president arrested for embezzling over $100,000, ran the headline on the Scottsdale News website. My phone started ringing with reporters wanting comments. Martin advised me to say nothing publicly while litigation was ongoing, so I politely declined all interviews. The other HOA board members, Brenda and Carol, resigned immediately once Rebecca was arrested. They claimed they had no knowledge of any wrongdoing, which was probably true. Rebecca had kept tight control over everything precisely so she could steal without oversight. An emergency HOA meeting was called for Saturday morning. With the board essentially dissolved, the homeowners needed to elect new leadership and figure out what to do next. I attended the meeting, which was held in the pool house. The irony was not lost on me. The room was freezing, of course, since there was no longer any gas heat. About 20 homeowners showed up, which was most of the community. David Martinez took charge of the meeting since he was the only committee member left. He explained the situation to everyone, laying out the full extent of Rebecca's crimes and the financial damage to the HOA. We are going to need to conduct a full forensic audit, David explained. We need to determine exactly how much was stolen and where the money went. We also need to elect a new board immediately and start working with attorneys to recover what we can. What about Erin's lawsuit? Someone asked. I recognized her as Patricia, one of the homeowners who had contacted me. Erin has every right to sue, David said. The HOA wronged him terribly. However, I am hoping we can reach a settlement that is fair to everyone. The HOA funds are depleted because of Rebecca's theft. If we go through expensive litigation, there will be nothing left for anyone. Everyone looked at me. I stood up to address the group. I just want to be made whole, I said. I want reimbursement for my stolen gas, which totals about $1,800. I want my property repairs paid for, which is $4,500. I want the fake fines and lien removed. And I want my legal fees covered, which are currently around $12,000. That is what I am asking for. I am not trying to destroy the HOA or bankrupt anyone. I just want justice. There was murmuring among the homeowners, but it seemed positive. Jennifer raised her hand. I think Erin is being more than fair, she said. He could ask for much more. Rebecca destroyed his property and harassed him for weeks. He deserves compensation. Others nodded in agreement. We spent another hour discussing next steps. The homeowners voted to elect David as interim president, with Jennifer and Marcus as board members. They voted to engage a forensic accountant immediately. And they voted to settle with me for the amounts I requested, to be paid out of whatever funds remained or were recovered. Martin negotiated the formal settlement over the next week. The HOA agreed to pay me $22,300, covering all my costs and fees. They agreed to remove all fines and liens immediately. They agreed to issue a formal apology. In exchange, I agreed to drop the lawsuit against the HOA itself, though I reserved the right to pursue action against Rebecca personally if needed. It was fair. It was reasonable. It was over. The forensic accountant's report came out 3 weeks later. Rebecca had stolen $137,000 over 4 years. She had created fake landscaping companies, pool maintenance companies, and various other vendors. The checks went to bank accounts she controlled. She had been living well beyond her means, taking vacations and buying luxury items with stolen HOA funds. The district attorney filed 11 felony counts against her. With the mountain of evidence, her attorney advised her to take a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to 6 counts of theft and fraud. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. Whether she would ever actually pay back the money was questionable, but at least she was being held accountable. My gas bills returned to normal, averaging about $45 per month. My yard was repaired and looked better than before. The settlement money hit my account in early March, making me whole again. The new HOA board was completely different from Rebecca's regime. David, Jennifer, and Marcus actually cared about the community rather than power and control. They made reasonable decisions, communicated clearly, and actually listened to homeowners. One of their first acts was to install a proper gas line to the pool house, paid for through HOA funds as it should have been from the beginning. The pool house was properly heated, and no homeowner was being stolen from. I ran into Officer Patterson at a coffee shop a few weeks after everything was resolved. He recognized me and came over to say hello. "How are things going with your HOA situation?" he asked. "All resolved," I said. "New board, settlement reached. Rebecca is in prison where she belongs." "Good," Officer Patterson said. "I am glad you reported it. A lot of people would have just paid those inflated bills and assumed it was normal. You did the right thing by investigating and standing up for yourself." "I almost did not," I admitted. "It would have been easier to just pay the bills and ignore it. But you did not, And because of that, you exposed a criminal operation and probably saved other homeowners from years of additional theft. That matters. I thought about that conversation a lot over the following weeks. It would have been so easy to just accept the situation, to avoid conflict, to let Rebecca and her friends continue their schemes. But standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult and stressful, had made a real difference. The community changed too. Homeowners were more engaged, attending HOA meetings and asking questions. The culture of fear and arbitrary enforcement that Rebecca had created was gone. People felt comfortable actually living in their homes without worrying about ridiculous fines for minor aesthetic violations. Jennifer got her toy fine reversed and refunded. Marcus was approved to install his solar panels. Patricia investigated her water usage and found she did not have a theft situation, just an old, inefficient toilet that was running constantly. She fixed it, and her bills went back to normal. By summer, Desert Heights felt like an actual community rather than a dictatorship. People knew their neighbors. Kids played outside without parents worrying about toy fines. The pool and pool house were used regularly and properly maintained with legitimate HOA funds. I even started attending HOA meetings regularly, not because I had to, but because I wanted to stay informed and involved. David appreciated having someone with engineering knowledge who could provide input on maintenance and infrastructure issues. One evening in June, I was sitting on my back patio when David walked over. We had become friends through this whole experience, bonded by surviving HOA corruption. "Got a minute?" David asked. "Sure, grab a chair." David sat down with a beer I offered him. "I wanted to thank you again. I know the last few months were hell for you, but your willingness to fight back really saved this community." The forensic accountant said if Rebecca had continued for another 2 years, the HOA would have been completely bankrupt. We would have needed special assessments, possibly even legal action against all homeowners. You stopped it. "I just wanted my gas bill to make sense," I said with a laugh. "Yeah, but you could have stopped there. You could have fixed your line and walked away. Instead, you fought the harassment, involved the police, exposed the corruption. That took guts." "It took a good lawyer," I corrected. "It took both," David said. "And I am glad you did it. This is a better community now because you did not back down." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the desert sunset paint the sky orange and purple. David was right. Things were better. But more importantly, I had learned something valuable about standing up for what was right, even when the easier path would have been to just go along. The legal concept of easements and property rights might seem boring to most people, but they exist for good reasons. They protect individuals from exactly the kind of abuse I had experienced. And when those protections are violated, there are systems in place to correct it, to hold people accountable, to restore justice. But those systems only work if people use them, if people speak up, if people document and report and refuse to be bullied into silence. In August, I received a check for $8,000. It was the first restitution payment from Rebecca, garnished from her prison work wages and from the liquidation of some of her assets. The HOA distributed it proportionally to all homeowners based on what was stolen. My share was $8,000, representing my gas theft and a portion of the overall HOA fund theft. I put the money toward a vacation to Colorado, somewhere cooler where I could hike and not think about Arizona heat or gas bills or HOA drama. It was peaceful and restorative. When I returned, there was a card in my mailbox from several neighbors, thanking me for standing up to Rebecca and improving the community. It was signed by 15 different families. That meant more to me than the money, honestly. Life settled into a comfortable routine. Work was going well. My house was exactly as I wanted it. My gas bills were reasonable. The HOA was functional and fair. I had good relationships with my neighbors. Sometimes I would walk past the pool house and remember that cold January day when I discovered that mysterious gas line. It seemed like years ago, not months. So much had happened, so much had changed. The gas line that had fed the pool house from my meter was still there, buried in the ground, but it was capped and dead at both ends. A permanent reminder of what happened and why it mattered. I never saw Rebecca again after her arrest. She did not live in Desert Heights anymore, obviously. Her house was foreclosed on when she could not make payments from prison. A nice family with young kids bought it in May. They had no idea about the drama that had unfolded in the community just months before, and I saw no reason to tell them. That was the past. The new HOA board implemented proper oversight controls. All financial transactions required 2 signatures. Monthly financial reports were distributed to all homeowners. Vendor contracts were put out for competitive bid. It was basic common sense governance that should have been happening all along. In September, the pool house needed a new water heater. The board got 3 quotes, selected the best value, and paid for it with HOA funds. The work was done properly and documented thoroughly. This was how an HOA was supposed to function. I helped David review the vendor proposals since plumbing and mechanical systems were adjacent to my engineering expertise. It felt good to contribute something positive to the community rather than just fighting against corruption. Jennifer organized a community fall festival in October. It was the first community event since Rebecca's arrest, and there was some nervousness about whether people would actually show up. But they did. Nearly every household came out for an afternoon of food, games, and socializing. Kids ran around playing tag. Adults chatted and laughed. The pool house, properly heated with its own legitimate gas line, served as headquarters for the event. It was exactly what community events should be, fun and inclusive rather than mandatory and stressful. I manned the grill, cooking burgers and hot dogs for hours. It was simple and satisfying. People thanked me throughout the day, not just for the food, but for everything, for fighting back, for exposing the corruption, for making Desert Heights a better place to live. I appreciated the gratitude but tried to deflect it. I just wanted a reasonable gas bill, I kept saying. But people seemed to understand it was bigger than that. It was about standing up to abuse of power. It was about accountability. It was about making sure communities were actually governed for the benefit of residents, not for the enrichment of corrupt board members. By November, life was completely back to normal, or rather, it had achieved a new, better normal. The trauma and stress of the winter and spring had faded. The community was healthy and functional. Justice had been served. My gas bill in November was $42. I smiled when I saw it. That number, so simple and reasonable, represented everything I had fought for. It represented property rights, personal autonomy, and basic fairness. I had cut that gas line legally, properly, and justifiably. I had walked away from their demands and their threats, and I had won. Not because I was particularly brave or clever, but because I was right. Because the law supported me. Because there were systems in place to protect people from exactly what Rebecca and her board had tried to do. On Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner for David and his family, Jennifer and her kids, and Marcus and his wife. We ate too much turkey and watched football and laughed about ordinary things. No one mentioned the HOA drama except once, when David raised a glass and said, "To Aaron, who taught us all to read our gas bills carefully." Everyone laughed and drank to that. It was a good memory to mark the end of a very strange year. December came, exactly 1 year after the gas bill had first jumped to $120. This December, my bill was $48. I had heat when I needed it, hot water when I wanted it, and the satisfaction of knowing every cubic foot of gas I was paying for was actually coming to my property. The pool house had its own meter now, its own bills, its own legitimate heating system. Community facilities were paid for by the community, as they should be. Individual homeowners paid only for their individual usage, as they should. It was such a simple concept, such basic fairness, but Rebecca had violated it for years. And when confronted, instead of apologizing and fixing it, she had escalated and attacked. That decision had cost her everything: freedom, reputation, financial security, everything. I sometimes wondered if she regretted her choices, sitting in prison with years left on her sentence. Did she wish she had just apologized when I first sent that email? Did she realize how differently things could have gone if she had just done the right thing? Probably not. People like Rebecca rarely saw themselves as the villain. She probably still thought she was the victim somehow, that I had destroyed her life by refusing to continue funding her embezzlement scheme. But I did not waste much time thinking about Rebecca Windsor. She was gone, facing consequences for her actions, and that was enough for me. The new year came, bringing with it a sense of renewal and hope. Desert Heights had survived its corruption crisis and emerged stronger. The community had learned valuable lessons about oversight, accountability, and the importance of engaged homeowners. I had learned lessons too. About standing up for yourself, about the importance of documentation, about how legal systems can work when properly utilized, about the value of good neighbors and honest leadership. My engineering work often dealt with systems, infrastructure, the bones of how things functioned. This experience had taught me that social systems and governance structures were just as important as physical infrastructure. A community needed both to function properly. Desert Heights had both now. Good infrastructure, good governance, and good people working together. It was everything a community should be. As for me, I was exactly where I wanted to be. In a home I loved, in a community that functioned properly, with a gas bill that made sense. The American dream was not complicated. It was just about fairness, justice, and the right to enjoy what you worked for without being stolen from. I had cut that gas line legally and walked away from their unreasonable demands. And in doing so, I had reclaimed not just my property rights, but my peace of mind and my faith in the system. Sometimes standing up for yourself was hard. Sometimes it was stressful and expensive and time-consuming. But it was always worth it, because the alternative, accepting injustice and abuse just to avoid conflict, was worse. That alternative eroded communities and enabled bad actors to continue their schemes. I thought about all of this on a warm January evening, sitting on my patio with a cold beer, watching the sun set over the desert. My gas meter ticked along slowly, feeding only my property. My yard was beautifully landscaped and well-maintained. My legal bills were paid. My settlement check was cashed. Everything was exactly as it should be. And if I ever got another unreasonable demand from anyone, HOA or otherwise, I knew exactly what to do. Document everything. Stand firm on what was right. Use the legal system. And never back down from bullies who thought they could abuse their authority, because at the end of the day, that gas line had been more than just a pipe in the ground. It had been a symbol of everything that was wrong with unchecked power and corruption. And cutting it, legally and properly, had been more than just solving a utility problem. It had been taking back control. It had been demanding accountability. It had been insisting on basic fairness. And that was a victory worth fighting for.